Hello, are you at NYU?
Hello. No, I just moved to a different corner because I was doing the workshop this morning, and so I wanted a blank wall.
But to say you're coming from the white void, I was coming from the green void.
Yeah.
How did the workshop go? I'm sorry I missed it. I wish I got a calendar invite. I thought the event would send me. I should have
Yeah, and
tried.
a couple of people gave us that feedback, so I think we'll make that better next time. But yeah, I think it went well. We got about I think 80 or so folks. Well, that was the maximum at any given time. I think there were different people at the two presentations, but
How
yeah,
many Americans showed up considering the timing?
I know it was so early here. I don't know why anyone else was.
Did any Californian show up besides you? But you're in New York now.
I'm in New York, so that helped a lot. But I don't know. It would be 4 a.m. there, so I kind of doubt it.
I can't. I don't know why they thought this timing was good, but anyway.
Well, we were focusing on European folks, so I think we did get some.
Fair. It is a European
Yeah.
conference. You're right.
For everyone else, we had an Upchain workshop this morning, so in case you're wondering what we're talking about.
I saw the email 6 hours later, and then I'm like, did I miss this? Marina was like, you definitely missed it. So
I think the EU is tired of everything being on California time. So
this is their revenge. Yeah, exactly.
This day back is I had to present at 7 a.m.
We stayed back 6 to 7 p.m. for you guys.
All right, I guess we can go ahead and get started then. Let's see. I threw a couple things in here. Yeah, so I guess we'll start with this. I created a very, very drafty proposed final API for just kind of like to have an end goal in mind for what it is we're trying to actually achieve as we start creating demos and other things. So then we can, converge on this, and so that we have a vision of where we're going, even though it'll probably be a while before all of these things will work in practice. But cool. Here, I'll post a link to this in the chat. Again, this is what I was able to put together in an hour or so. So it's not as polished as I think it will be. I'll update it to make it more polished and clear. But I mostly am just interested if anyone has feedback, especially on this high-level API section of this doc, of just like the commands that we imagine people actually running when they use whatever this tool is. So I can share my screen, or people can just look at it. It's just the top half of that document. So.
Yeah, so this is great, Marina. Thanks. I just have one maybe nitpicky comment. I wouldn't call this API. To me, API is like a for a remote interface, right? For remote calls.
Oh yeah, I guess this is more like the CLI.
I'll call this CLI. Yeah.
Fair enough.
When we do an init, we don't have any arguments there, or we think we probably will need some arguments. So we're thinking.
I imagine that we will. Yeah, especially like things like key locations or anything like that. I think we'll need some of that. Yeah.
You have to say what repository we're pushing stuff to in a registry somewhere.
Yeah, I think we'll want to do a combination, and this is something we can talk about, of including these things as command line arguments, and maybe having config files also on the client system that they can refer to, just to make the argument shorter. But yeah.
Yeah, and I'm guessing I don't think we're going to get away without having a tough server somewhere. And so we'll have to specify that server location as well.
Yeah, in a couple of these, kind of I had this repository and then tough repo, where the tough repo would I think be that like separate
okay
location for that. which right now I think would be on the registry. As we get into the snapshot timestamp decisions, we can continue to iterate, but.
Yeah, the snapshot timestamp is what I'm thinking of. So it'll be not a registry server necessarily, but more of a tough server for that one. And so there's going to be
Yeah.
the repository you're pushing your image to, the repository that might hold other metadata, which I'm hoping we can look that up. So we're not necessarily hard bound to pass that in the command line. And then whatever server we need to talk to for snapshots and other stuff.
Yeah.
Is our snapshots just like content? Is it anything more that it needs to process? Do we need another server for storage, or can we just point it to some location where we can get the snapshots?
I don't think we need the server for the storage of the snapshots necessarily. That's going to go up to the registry at some point, but we need a server that's tracking that and timestamping everything. And the timestamp is the thing that you can't easily do in the registry because it's got to be continuously updating.
You mean you need a component that keeps updating the timestamp, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But that will not necessarily store any of the content. It can update the timestamps and push the timestamp somewhere, right?
Yeah. It'll need a key.
Yeah. I mean, I was even thinking of something very simple like have a cron GitHub action or something that can actually create timestamps, or run it in your cluster that can actually just keep updating as needed, right? So
yeah, I think we actually have a working demo of using in Python Tough using GitHub Actions to post a repo. So we could probably figure out some coordination there and see if we can get that working.
Now, security wise, if you have the snapshot just sitting up on the registry, you're thinking, how does whatever GitHub action or something like that know which snapshot is the valid one, that it hadn't been pushed a malicious one potentially, or a backdated one or something?
Maybe like the process that creates the snapshot and puts it on the registry can, like, I don't know, also push some kind of notification to this timestamp server that this is the new one we should be trusting or something. That
was kind of the reason I was thinking that whatever is doing the timestamping is going to need to be told directly.
I see. So there's side metadata that needs to be stored, that kind of a test, this is the timestamp that can be used.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to keep track of the whole snapshot, just has to know which one is the correct one.
Yeah, I think that if we end up putting it all in the registry, we can make it easier for the client side, like the download side of this. But I do think that there will be something on the upload side where we'll have to make sure that this is at least somewhat coordinated on the upload.
Yeah, and I am also concerned when you get into snapshots, you're talking about a single resource potentially that has race conditions in it, because you can have multiple clients pushing up multiple tags all in the same repository at once. You do a build of multi-architecture or something like that, you're pushing all kinds of stuff simultaneously.
Yeah, and I think that we can batch the snapshot, but there's pros and cons to that. You can batch it so it updates less frequently, but then there's a gap if the client downloads it while it's batched. So
there's a potential that could be, if you're doing multi-architecture, there's potential that could be multiple machines that are disconnected from each other, all running those uploads simultaneous. And so handling concurrency, I kind of lean towards saying, okay, we're going to have some kind of tough machine out there doing snapshots anyway. Just send it the update that says, hey, add this to the snapshot. And then it does the reconciliation at that point.
How do you trust that timestamp server from a trust boundary perspective? Like, why do you believe that the timestamp server or the tough server would be any more trusted than the registry from a timeliness perspective?
I mean, basically it's because the root lists the key and says that it trusts it. I think that there's no reason, like this, I think could be run as a registry service. It's because you're kind of relying on the registry for like uptime and stuff like that anyway, which is a similar property. I think that the advantage to having at least the option of a separate service is that it's less work for registries, basically, is that they don't have to maintain this.
But also trust to me, kind of giving you a second answer to that one, Sajay. The client could run this themselves and they'll have access to those keys and everything else. And they could say, we're the one doing the snapshot. We trust that machine locally. We don't trust the registry we're pushing it to, but we trust our local server.
All right. So you can acquire the content locally without going to the registry is the point, I guess, if you really wanted to.
You can push the timestamps from a server that you trust.
All right.
And then it just needs to, the thought process I'm coming up with is if you're already going to have that, that might be a good place to do some of that reconciliation of conflicts when we start pushing the same metadata from potentially multiple places simultaneously.
I can give some background as why I was asking that question. Primarily, one of the challenges is that when folks have to run yet another reliable endpoint, the cost just goes up significantly. So one of the options that we've been thinking is I've been trying to push a PR to Winston Batz's extension PR, which will enable you to maybe run any kind of extension on the registry directly. We're not there yet, but if you do have a reasonably endpoint that the tough clients can look up, we don't have to run yet another, endpoint. But if it is about exposing it directly on the client, then I think that makes perfect sense, where you don't want to go to another server and you just trust your local boundary in some form. But if it is another DNS that has to go through another authentication pipeline or over another network, then it's as costly as going to a registry anyway. And you have the same attack vectors on both sides, right? You have to secure it in another way as well. So that's why I'm wondering, what is your security boundaries from? Nobody trusts the registry anyway, but you're saying that you have to trust a tough server. Why would I do that if the content is across the same authentication boundary? Because you're trusting only the keys is my understanding, right? The keys are the ones that actually govern everything. So as long as the data is signed and it's timely, why do we need another tough server? And we can take dependency on the registry itself to store. Again, this is just an open discussion. I don't have any recommendation. We just wanted to kind of throw it out there.
I think there will be some cases where when people implement this, they're going to implement it directly on the registry. I think that's just going to happen. You're going to see people like Harbor that come out and say, here's the fully packed solution that has everything in there, or cloud vendors that say, we're just adding this capability right onto our solution so that the customer doesn't have to run a separate server. So I think that is going to happen. And that's going to be reality. And then there are other clients that are going to say, hey, we want more security, so we want to run this on our own infrastructure. We know that that key never leaves our own infrastructure.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that all makes sense to me as well. So, okay, we good here, kind of on the same page about the direction we're heading with this more generally, because I'm going to go into the demo next, which is not quite here yet. So I wanted to do this first, kind of set up the goals. Yeah, so this is the next thing I have in here. I could present some of this, but I think you can get the idea from here for now. It's not as fully integrated as I would want before demonstrating it. I think one of the things that I wanted to kind of talk about and check, well, we can go over it first. I have a couple of questions basically. Yeah, so I created a branch of GoTough. That's kind of the main actual work item that I did here that can sign, digest objects. And I think I'm really hoping that all of the changes we make to GoTough can then be upstreamed so that we don't have to actually maintain a fork of this, because that would be, yeah, anyway, that's another thing to maintain. I don't want to do that. But hopefully that'll work out. I've been working with other maintainers of that project, and I think it's doable, but we'll see how that all goes. So yeah, basically what this demo does and will do is creates an image and a local registry server, and then creates a local Go repo using kind of the existing GoTough stuff that does it all locally, and then starts to upload that back up to the server. I think as we integrate this more tightly and like better, this could all run as part of the same service, which can make a lot of this faster and I think easier. Yes, question.
No, were you projecting something or?
Oh, no, I probably should be. You're right. Sorry.
I was confused too. I wasn't sure what to look at.
Yeah, I was looking at it on my screen, but I didn't actually project it. Get that working. Okay, there we are. Sorry. This is what I'm talking about. Yeah, so this is branches we're working off of. I guess the Aura stuff is actually released now, which is nice. So we're actually working off the real release there. Create an image, upload it to localhost. This is a lot of commands right now that I think, as Sajay said, and I totally agree, this probably should be a lot less commands when we end up doing the final version of this, to basically just sign the image that you made with the GoToF library. Yeah, I think that what this does is mostly working today. It's just that the exact integration, I think, needs some work. And then this uploads the delegated targets as an artifact type to the registry. That part's all working. This is the part that is not quite working yet. And this is actually what I wanted to kind of talk about a little bit, is how to upload the top level targets en route to the different repository. I think there's kind of two options here. I think we could either start by not having a separate repository and just reference this all within the same repository on the repository on the registry, which would be easier to implement with stuff that we have today. Because I think the challenge I was running into here is that the artifacts have to reference something. This line here is the part that's broken because this doesn't exist. Because this is uploading the metadata itself. And I think there's a way to do this where like the root metadata would be uploaded as some kind of artifact independently.
Yeah, you can upload an independent, is it just a JSON blob, right?
It's just a JSON blob. So I think maybe I just need help with getting that working.
Oh yeah, definitely. I can help you with that.
Okay, thanks. Okay.
And then you can just reference that using digest or tag to kind of like attach the root JSON to that.
Okay, great. Yeah.
What
so
does
I can attach targets to that. Okay.
Yeah. What does root dash pointer actually indicate though?
Oh, I was just making this up. I was like, I know I need something here. So this is my kind of thing. I was thinking this would be like a tag that would point to the root metadata on the server, so you could like discover it. But
that's reasonable. Yeah, that makes sense.
So how would this? How would this work? So if you wanted to support, I mean, I guess let me put it this way: could you? So the way the TUF client works is that it's gonna look for things like root.json first, right? Or like 1.root.json and 2.root.json and 3. Could we give it names like that, or what is the idea?
Yeah, so one of the tricky things with this this whole thing is the ability to reference things by digest and tag. I think we could tag them with those names or something very like those names. That would be totally doable. And maybe that's the way to go, especially for root metadata. And then once you find the root metadata you want to use, you can then use the artifact API. I think I have some of this here. You can basically discover all of the different things that point to the root metadata, which would be all of the different targets metadata, and you could use that to then go down the chain, which is a little bit backwards forwards, but I think it would work. Does that make sense? Did I explain that right?
I guess I don't see the picture yet, but that's okay.
Yeah, I think looking at actual tags and data might make it easier. So for example, that's what I was wondering. So root.pointer is your root metadata, right? In some way.
Yeah.
So we should, I don't know, put some convention that you want so that it's really clear that this is the root metadata for the repository. And then you can derive all the others from that. Yeah. And if you just look at the tag in the repository, if you list the tags, you will see the root metadata and all the other images that you can pull, but the root one would be a clear tag saying that this is the root metadata for this repository.
Yeah, I think your root JSON is going to have to contain that localhost root pointer name in there because you can't do a cross repository reference.
Yeah, so I think we'll want that. Yeah, so I think if we're able to upload the root metadata as just a JSON blob, which I might ping Sanjay about later this week to get that working, and then refer to that when uploading the targets instead. This would be targets instead of root.
So you've got the root JSON there in the repository. What's the content look like in there? Is that fixed content that you can't change, or do we have flexibility to add some of our own fields in there?
I think we want to include, I think, all the TUF JSON root definition metadata, which is like basically it lists the keys for all the other top level roles and that kind of stuff. I think there is the ability to add any additional fields that we want as well. I think the tough spec allows that kind of extensibility. Plus we're extending the tough spec anyway, so we have a bit of flexibility.
Yeah, my thought is you can either push a whole artifact up with Auras, or you just push up basically an empty index that just has that name, but you call it the tough metadata for your individual project you're pushing. And then for the actual root repo, it's going to have the same tough metadata. The reason I'm keeping it the same is that if everything is just one repo, you don't need this little pointer in there. You're just going to go right to the source immediately.
Okay, so wait, so we have the index that's just kind of a blank thing that is pointed to by the root pointer, and then you could then upload the root.json as like a reference to that. Is that what you're proposing?
Yeah, you could have it like an empty index, just has an annotation on it, just says, hey, I'm not the real tough metadata. Your metadata is over here.
Oh, okay.
Just has a name. And then
yeah, so that would be in the same repository as the actual image and stuff.
Yeah, whatever image you're pulling, and then the root metadata is whatever the tough metadata repo, wherever you got that, and that's going to have the name. In this case, I think are you calling it tough metadata, or you don't even have a tag on there. You just call the whole repo tough metadata.
Yeah, it's called the whole repo tough metadata. But...
Yeah, and so you just go pull from that repo whatever that tag is, the common tag you need to pull. So we just define some common tag in there. Tag name might be tough metadata for all we care.
Yeah, that's kind of nice because then you can discover it directly from there. I think the one tricky bit is we want to make sure that even if the client's discovering the metadata from a pointer, that they're not discovering the keys from the pointer, that they have the some kind of public keys that they already trust or something that's referred to. I think
tough you've kind of got to have that already, right? That's something you're going to have regardless. It's just, to me, the reason for the pointer is just to make this that we're going multi-repository and potentially multi-registry at this point. Also,
and that would make it clear in case registries want to do some fancy kind of garbage collection stuff, they could use that. If that pointer is deleted, they could maybe do something.
Well, the thing I was going to mention is that you can't even do garbage collection across repositories. So there will be GC happening in your there will be GC happening in your destination repository, and then whatever the root is pointing to might get, the things it's pointing to might get deleted, and there's nothing you control on that. Go ahead, Trashank.
Oh, sorry. Hi. Could I share my screen? I just wanted to ask a series of dumb questions. We'll see where it goes. Okay. So the way I think I sort of understand. I'm gonna stop raising my hand. How do I do that? There, you get the idea. Sorry about that. So Marina, if you plan to use, help me understand how this proposal works. Maybe I'm missing something. So the way GoTough works is you have this root.json on your disk, right? You've loaded it into memory. Now you're trying to talk to the tough repo, which could be a registry. And you're trying to ask it, oh, I don't know. Let's pretend we're at version 4 of root, right? Right? And then now we're trying to fetch 5.root.json because that's what GoTough knows. It's sort of things on a file system kind of layer. So how would I fetch this? What am I fetching exactly? Am I fetching a particular, maybe I am fetching, sorry, go ahead.
I think you would be pulling that tag basically from the
place like v5, like this.
Yeah, we could name it like that, or I think dots are allowed in the tag naming scheme, right? So I think we could just use the same name.
I see. So what you would be fetching is something like, I would translate this to something like this.
Yeah, basically that or root pointer or root repository, whatever we end up naming that thing, the place where all the tough metadata is stored.
Okay. So there'll be like an org or a project called tough metadata, and then the tags are all the file names, the particular files you're looking for.
Yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify because I'm not an OCI expert yet. So does this make sense to everybody? Would this work?
I'm a little lost because I just need to understand the discovery mechanism. So what's the first call, second call, third call to kind of get that JSON file?
Yeah,
So we
so
start from the image, right? So when the deployment happens, the image is the first thing. We need to probably tell it, you got to go here to find the v5 or 5.json file. And so there is some configuration that needs to happen on the client that knows this is the parent or root tough metadata.
Yes. Yeah, just to clarify, the root thing is it's a tough thing. Tough just goes off and done its own. It's like a sort of an internal discovery thing.
Yeah.
This is not the repository telling you what to do. This is you asking the repository, do you have updates for root? Because that's just the internal understanding of the client.
Okay,
Does
so
that
the
make sense?
client can have a convention is what you're saying, like where to look for.
Yes. So the client starts at, like, say, version 1 of the root, and then it'll ask, do you have a 2 for me? And do you have a 3? And then do you have a 4? And then it stops at, like a 4 or 4 or something.
Okay, and this
And
can
so
be a
from-
config or a tough client in it or something like that, where it's all on the client done, basically. It doesn't.
Not on tough in it, but I think in Marina stuff, download target or whatever the equivalent.
yeah, so the in like that high level overview, I think that the verify target would theoretically do all this behind the scenes. It would download all the different, like find the most recent version of root, and then make sure it can be verified, use the keys in that to verify targets, and then verify the chain, etc., all the way down to actually verifying the signature on the image.
So does the root actually cross over multiple images at this point, or is that
Yeah. I think that, and there's there's options. I think it has the option to cross multiple images. I think you could choose to implement it such that you made a root that only talked about one single image. I think it's a little bit more useful if you use a root that at least covers everything in a repository, if not all the repositories that you manage or maintain, just to simplify key distribution and all of that. But
okay, one option, if I may propose, is we can simplify the discovery mechanism if you want by just asking the image itself, where do I need to look at the metadata? Like if you use the discover thing, it can tell you tough metadata location, and then you can go, you don't have to have a lot of the configuration on the client. Obviously, you don't trust the data. There's a verification step, so that doesn't affect any of the security thing. The reason why the problems that we saw when we spoke about signatures is the more configuration that you want on the client to discovery, it becomes the tooling needs to kind of like stitch this into configs, and updating containerd, updating Kubernetes, all that just becomes harder. Whereas you offload the discovery mechanism to some other place, which you don't trust, obviously, but you know this is the chain you need to walk. And if there is compromise, you'll know at any point in time of validating the content itself. That's another thing. But we don't have to worry if you want to force the client to go look someplace, that's definitely should be an option. But the simple scenario would be client asks, hey, I want this image. I want to install Nginx. Nginx tells you this is where you can find the tough metadata. And the tough client can then just walk that referrer pointer and then just get, okay, these are the blobs that I need. Can be root JSON, can be any of the metadata files as needed. So we can make that even more simpler if you want to. Again, that's something I can.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea where you could have the registry or somebody basically provide a way for the client just to ask for, okay, I want this image and I want all the tough metadata I need to verify it.
Yeah, and you can store that configuration besides the image, attach it to the image. And so when you query the digest and say, I want tough metadata, you can just get a full blob of what you want, either collapsed or split, however it is. That would be the simplest in my opinion, because Sigstore attaches it through a tag. And if they had a easier discovery mechanism, they would just attach it as an artifact or something like that. And it's pretty much even any other attached signatures can come that way. So you can append more and add more metadata as it is, because I'm guessing you only care about the fact of being able to trust the JSON once you get the file, right? There's nothing else that you need.
Yeah, I think that the one thing you get from doing the root update mechanism where you query all of them is that but I guess you can still do a denial of service in between. Sorry, I'm talking to myself. But I think the main thing you get is, you basically are just doing it yourself instead of trusting someone else to give you the right metadata, but you do verify signatures on everything. So I guess if, as long as you get the metadata, that should be all right. And in fact, I think that's a lot like the metadata verification mechanism used by Obtain, the automotive variant of Tough, because similarly, like not every ECU in the vehicle can actually communicate with the server. So they're instead just given the metadata they should use for verification. So I think this would be a very similar kind of bundle, basically, of the metadata.
Right. So let me see if I understand this correctly using an analogy. It's a bit like, you know how PyPI is adding Tough. Suppose PyPI doesn't have mirrors, they removed the mirrors, but you know that there's only one set of keys, one root of trust you should use. So what you do is the only thing you tell the client is use this root. Don't anything else that doesn't follow from this, don't trust it. But if the registry tells you go check this mirror or that mirror or this mirror for the Tough metadata, should be okay, as long as you locally correctly pin your root of trust. Is that acceptable, Sajay?
I think to me, it makes perfect sense that you want local overrides, or you want to be able to enforce that this is the only set that you trust, even if the registry tells you some other place to look at, right? Is that what you're kind of like hinting?
No. Does the what I'm saying is, okay, yeah, exactly. So the registry tells you where to go for the metadata. Now, how do you verify them? What set of keys do you use is my question. Do you trust the registry for that, or does that come solely your decision?
These are totally your decision. The registry
Oh,
will
okay.
never
Then
get
we're on the same page.
Yeah.
The only thing the registry tells you is where exactly to go for the metadata. Got it.
The discovery is the only thing that I want to simplify here, because the more configurations you have for each image, you'll have to tell the client, okay, go look here, go look here. Instead, if we can store this as an attached information to the image, you can ask the image itself, where do I need to find my Tough metadata? And that automatically enables you to walk the chain. Like I know that there is a constant conversation of, can we just do it in existing registries versus this whole new artifact thing, but avoiding all that, if we go by convention, you can even attach a tag like what Sixstore is doing, or you can use something much more simpler like what the artifact thing is doing. That's a second step. But I think the discovery definition is what I'm trying to understand. Like, you access the image, what's the next piece of information you need to make this decision? You need another JSON blob is what I'm understanding. And that is, which JSON blob is it exactly in this set is what I'm trying to understand.
It's a lot of JSON blobs, not just one. I know we've been talking about root, but yeah, there's like the timestamp, the snapshot, the targets, and so on.
So do you want to acquire everything in one shot, or do you want to make multiple requests here?
I think either. I think as far as the actual verification is concerned, I think it doesn't matter so much whether the client gets it all at once or.
We can make it happen both ways. That's why I'm asking.
Right.
If you have
storage wise, you're going to want to store it as separate. And so it's going to end up being separate requests for each manifest.
Do you want to collapse them into, okay, you want different blobs as well as different manifests, right?
Yeah, I think for the ability to update them on the registry, they'll need to be stored separately. So that say the targets will be updated more frequently than the root, for example. So you could, I guess you could just include the root every time you update the targets, but I don't know. It does seem simpler to keep them separate.
Okay, that's something we can decide. As long as if we can ask for an image, give me all related Tough data. That might be an easy way to kind of like think about this. And
yeah, thought I'm throwing out on this one. Your client is going to have the trusted roots. So you're never going to the registry to say, who are my trusted roots? The client's going to come with that ahead of time. And then if you go pull something like Nginx and you check the tag in that repo and it says, Tough root, and that comes back, maybe it's just a simple one-liner JSON, maybe it's an OCI index, or different ways you can implement that. But the end thing is that it's going to say, hey, your Tough root over here is really localhost, whatever, Tough metadata, go over to that repo to find it. And so then you jump over, you flip to the other repo and you say, okay, over here, give me the root data. The reason I kind of like that is that you can mirror this whole Nginx repo somewhere else and potentially have the Tough root also on that other machine, but potentially managed by a different timestamp server, other stuff like that. And in doing that, you could change this one field. It's not signed or anything. It's just a pointer. and the client is still the one that has that ultimate trust and says, okay, they pointed me somewhere. I looked at it. I verified that I actually had some real data that I trust because I had the same root key. Does that logically make sense what I'm kind of thinking? Or
Yeah, I only have one concern, and Marina can correct me if I'm wrong here. I think Marina was working with the assumption, I could be wrong here, that we use this thing called map files, which really is a way of saying which route should I use. Okay, so for which artifacts, let's say like Nginx, not only where do I go, I know the location. So this map file will look something like this. It will be like
it won't be one route over here. It'll be like multiple routes and saying, okay, I
Oh, I
trust
understand,
for
I understand.
Nginx,
Yeah.
Nginx, I trust this route kind of thing.
Right. Let me actually bring up that for so it's a bit more concrete. Could I share my screen, please?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, like I concur. I haven't really gotten to the client workflow entirely, but this is definitely something I had in mind for that when we get there.
So it looks something like this. The map file would look something like this. I believe this is where Marina is starting from, and I see what you gents are saying, and I'll try to explain the difference. So the map file is something like, well, these are the registries that I know about, right? It could be Docker Hub or Azure Container Registry. You get the idea. But in this case, it's Django and Python. And we're saying, hey, listen, if you're looking for Django files, you can use it from both of these repositories. You need to get consensus. Well, actually, in this case, one. But my point is, it also tells you what route to use, right, Marina? Did I get this wrong?
Yeah, and I think that we might even want to explicitly list the route rather than the registry in like in a variation of top 4. Because you might have multiple different roots of trust on the same registry. And I think that's a situation we'd want to support. Especially for something like Docker Hub, if like Docker would have an official set of images that they're signing like they do today, but somebody else I think might also want to say this is the subset of Docker images that I'm signing. And
sure. Yeah. But for the purposes of the discussion, let's try to keep it simple. We'll say that one registry has only one root of trust. So to answer Brandon's and Sajay's question, here's what I think is what they're trying to say is, they're trying to say, well, I don't know where I'm gonna go to get the tough metadata. I know where I'm gonna go to get the artifact. That's the only thing I know. I don't necessarily know where to get the tough metadata because it's not gonna be in the same place. Here, we're assuming they're in the same place. That's the problem, you see? So that's difference number one right there. And number two, what I think they're missing is what I'm missing from the conversation is, if you're not careful, the problem is you might have multiple roots of trust on your system, multiple root certificates. If you're not careful in specifying which root you use to trust, you could fall for attacks where you use the wrong root to verify, because the registry is now able to control and tell you, go use this top metadata. You see what I'm trying to say? It's
it would
like,
tell you,
go ahead.
It would tell you go over here because this is where I'm doing all the storage maintenance of the root and timestamp stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's still up to the client that says, here's the route that I'm expecting to find over there.
Oh,
and
so
if I
you
don't
fix a
find
route.
it, I'm going to fail.
So it's not like you're looking up in some arbitrary key in a set of routes.
No,
you don't look to the registry for that. You just, the client itself has that pinned in it.
So this basically you're using one root CA and that's it. You're not looking for like a match for an arbitrary match in a route. I just wanted to clarify.
You may have multiple out there, but it's up to the registry to say, here's where you're going to find the metadata for this repo, just because, organizations might restructure things.
Yeah.
And it's up to the client that says, yeah, it told me that, but I don't believe it until I actually verify that key.
And I think, Trishak, I think you missed this discussion in the kind of general meeting, but basically one of the things we talked about was this priority problem, which I brought up there. And I think Brandon's proposal, and I think this was a popular one, was just to, instead of having to prioritize the different routes, you just have an explicit, disjointed mapping where there's no overlap in the mapping. Therefore, you don't
interesting.
Prioritize, you just know the mapping.
Yeah, we went through arbitrary choices and fall cases, bunch of attacks. So I don't trust any kind of non-specific pinning in any scenarios. I think the Brandon's discussion PR is probably one of the most complete that we had, which is for an artifact, almost down for an artifact, or like at least registry, we should be able to pin which cert would be
Which route
trusted.
you want to use? I see.
So that
Got
way,
it, got
the fall through case or arbitrary, which DNS wins kind of a case, right? All those are like super, like depends on what the server gives you, kind of a situation.
it. Right, exactly. Yep, because someone tells you go to the example.com, great. I don't trust example.com. I want to be able to pin, I trust only, I don't know, the Google root certificate to indirectly sign for example.com, right?
Yeah. We wanted to pin a specific artifact or a specific image to a given root or a certificate. This was, I think, this is the PR that Brandon had, or at least that needs to go to a PR.
So we were saying there's going to be a trust store that has keys, and these are names. These aren't really host names. These are just convenience names. Saying the Wabbit network's key is this key, all these settings, this is potentially your root key.
I see.
And then down the policy, we say for Wabbit networks, the corporate stuff, I trust them. In this case, I trust that key for everything, but I trust the Docker Hub key only for stuff that's over on Docker IO.
Very interesting.
And then if I find that key, I go ahead and use it. But it's up to the repository to point me over to somewhere with that root metadata that actually uses that key.
So this is all client policy. So the server is only about getting the blobs themselves. We don't want to be the source of trust. In running a registry, I know the problems if you get into that.
Got it. Okay, thanks. Thanks for explaining this. Yeah, I missed that discussion.
No worries.
Cool, then it makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, so if that addresses the content, I think if we just want to, so one thing that I don't understand and I don't know enough is what are the blobs that you need when you look at, let's say you get an image, what are the 3 files or 4 files? If you can just kind of like roughly give me a list, I can just probably like see if we can create an index or maybe just put it as an attached artifact, and then you can pull that JSON and then we can kind of test it through.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. I'll let you finish asking.
The other one is with a well-known tag. That is also an option if you want to have. So I think supporting both options are good because you can store the tough metadata in another repository, which is what some people would want, versus the simplistic scenario. Everything just lies in one repo because my scope and my access permissions are only to that repo. So both scenarios makes, in my head, it makes sense. So let's, if you can kind of like at least kind of put out, these are the 4 files that you need, either independently stored or stored as a bundle, we can then take that forward.
Yeah, so we would need the, like there's kind of a set of top level metadata, which would be the root, top level targets, timestamp and snapshot. And timestamp snapshot, I think will be implemented as phase 2, but that's part of the metadata. And then there will also be a delegated, at least one delegated targets file that's stored alongside the actual image you're signing. So those would be kind of the minimalistic 5. I think Tough itself supports multiple layers of delegations. So theoretically, you could have a delegated targets that, delegates further, but for the simple case, I don't think we need that. So. Yes, does that answer the question?
Kind of. When I ask, let me try it out. If you have like a test client with a bunch of files, then we can kind of like make sure we can store it and retrieve it at least.
Yeah, that would be great. I think so. Yeah, this demo should create the files locally that you'll need, and then I think after this conversation, I think I'll be able to finish the upload piece of that demo. So that should be working soon. I was just stuck on how to upload things to registries. I think it's solvable. And then the verification half, I think I need to make some changes to GoTough still in order to verify the stuff I changed for signing digests, but otherwise it should work.
Well, the targets contain what's going to be in that target. Is that going to be a list of the signatures that we're generating in Notary V2, or what does that look like?
Yeah, let me see if unfortunately, I don't think I prepared this, but okay, anyway. So this is what I've been changing in GoTough, because I think what the targets in Tough includes is the file name, which is kind of the problem part, as well as hashes of it and the length, basically. The file name obviously would instead be the digest. And the digest is also the hash. But then, my current code, the length is wrong because it needs to be better integrated with the registry stuff in order to accurately know the length in order to include that there. But yeah, that's the main thing that's included. And then of course that's all signed.
We should be able to get some of those things for you. If you know the digest, we can always come back and give you the length from the registry.
Yeah, I think that I could manually get it. Right now I'm manually putting the digest into the GoTough CLI. I think it would be better once we integrate this to just, it'll be more automatic. So yeah.
So to kind of like touch upon what Trishant was saying, this is more like the experience that we're trying to solve here, right? From a library perspective, is the plan to kind of like split off, hey, these are the tough libraries that you want to use, and with things like the map file, and so that what do we finally kind of ask somebody who's going to implement it in a cluster, tell them to write a verifier? How is that going to stitch together with other components and things like that?
Yeah, I think that you'll need, like it could be the same person or it could be two different entities. I'll list them both, but they could be the same person. You have one entity that creates the top level tough metadata, the root targets, and probably they're the entity probably responsible for this timestamp snapshot situation. Maybe that's a third entity, I don't know. But then, so you have that kind of root of trust entity. And all they have to do is delegate in the top level targets to a key that's then used in the delegated targets. Then the person who actually uploads the image and is responsible for signing it, they just create this delegated targets metadata file, sign that with their key, list the information about the actual thing that they're uploading, and then upload that alongside their image. So those are kind of the two processes that happen. And again, this could all be the same person, and we could definitely make commands such that this is all one command to run. But I think there's some power in separating that out so that you could have the same top level targets delegate to different folks.
Yeah, so GoTough will be a CLI, or will it be a set of libraries, or what's the?
It is both. Right now I'm using the CLI just for quick demo purposes. I think it'd be better to use the library for actual integration purposes.
Okay.
Just so that we can then customize what the CLI is for our cases instead of being tied to theirs. But
so if I add a new signature and we've already got Tough enabled on a repository, I'm going to need to go to that repository, pull down the current targets metadata, and then add another entry to that and then repush it. Are we on the same thought?
Yeah, so you'll have to upload the top level targets only when you need to add a new public key to be used to sign the delegated targets. Or I guess every time you create a new delegated targets thing that you're signing. If you're just uploading an image and you're already a trusted person to sign it, you don't have to do anything to the top level targets metadata.
But you're going to push your delegated metadata at that point.
But yeah, you're going to push your delegated metadata alongside it.
And then are we assuming that they've got the delegated metadata already local, or are we assuming they're going to pull from the registry to download the previous state?
I think my current thought is that each delegated target is just associated with a single image. So you could just replace it basically because there's no state you need to know about on the registry. There's, I think, another design option that would be, including multiple different targets within it, in which case you would have to worry about concurrency, but which is why I think that would be not ideal.
Yeah, that's where I'm going through is thinking of the concurrency. So if every image is its own delegated instance there, then you are touching the targets for everyone, right? Because you're going to be making a new delegate.
And you could then create, chains of delegations so that you could list less of these in the top level targets. You could say, okay, this is the top level one for this registry, for this repo, and then you have a single one associated with each image still. But
yeah, I would imagine it's going to be one at the repo level, but then within there that might shard out for garbage collection and just cross repository references, stuff like that. You can't do it the same way once you go over to the central metadata repo.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, and my goal and kind of in my head designing this is trying to decouple them as much as possible so that the top level one can be updated less frequently by someone external if needed. So
Well, I get
think
the feeling every time you push an image, you're going to do an update all the way up the chain somehow, because you're going to have the new timestamp pointing to it. You're going to have the new
Right.
target.
yeah, I guess you do have to update the timestamp snapshot, but hopefully not the targets. So that's I
No,
guess,
no, I think exactly. Sorry, go ahead.
oh, to go for it.
I think it would be helpful to give an example, maybe running ORAS, but also a separate process on the same server that does the tough stuff for you. So I think it's clear then what is happening. I think another way of saying what Marina just said is that the common use case is a project is going to update, say, a new Nginx image or whatnot. That gets uploaded as a JSON blob. And then the only thing the registry has to do is to produce a new snapshot and timestamp. That's it. That's the common case. The rare case is, in order for Nginx to be trusted in the first place, the registry will do a one-time operation saying, okay, I've verified Nginx's key. I'm delegating to it. Because you trust me, you can trust me when I say this is Nginx's key. That's a one-time operation. And of course, obviously, snapshot and timestamp also get snapshot and timestamp always get updated. That's the commonality here. The difference is whether you're updating the top level targets, the delegation, or one of the delegations further down. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. And what I'm sorting out in my head is which of those things is going to be just a JSON blob and which things might be actual registry objects, indexes with pointers point to other things.
Right.
That's sort of
I don't think we sorted
delineation.
that out yet. Yeah.
All right, and I think we had a question in the chat earlier from Ethan who had to go about signing the OCI descriptor versus
The whole manifest.
the whole manifest.
I can take that if you wanted to.
Great.
Okay, I just
that-
want to make
that's-
sure I'll defer it to the folks, OCI experts, but I just make sure we
Yeah.
adjust that.
Yeah, it's more of the notary project than us. We're just signing whatever comes out of the notary project at this point. But what they're looking at, the digest, and it's really the descriptor. You can have more data in that descriptor, including annotations, stuff like that. So you can add extra metadata in there if you want to, but also the whole manifest that you would potentially be signing. It's a byte stream of JSON. And once you start passing it around, sometimes people muck around with JSON. When they see JSON, they parse it and then unparse it, and bad things happen. So that digest and the descriptor that wraps it, it's guaranteeing that nobody changed anything. You're signing the exact same thing every time. And it's also how we look up things. If you query the registry and say, what is the current version of Nginx, you're going to get back, here it is with this digest attached to it. So.
Okay, cool. So what I did in GoTough right now, which is very much a draft, is basically sign over just that digest and at a length. Does that make sense as the thing that we should be signing for now? Or I think eventually we want to talk about tags and things. But that's...
Yeah. Tags is a big problem because of mutation. I think my take is trust the manifest because that's the one that's most complete and it can include annotations and labels and whatnot. So it gives an extensibility point also. But the manifest all boils down to what is called as a descriptor with the digest and the size and the media type associated with it. So as long as we have the digest somewhere, it should be okay with the size if possible.
Yeah, that digest is effectively the unique guarantee that what you're talking about is that manifest.
Okay, very cool. So just want to make sure we're going the right direction there. Okay, anything else? Last 5 minutes. I'm going to try and make that demo actually a demo by next week. Anything else?
Good.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Yeah, I think the only things I'm looking at, we've got the command lines, that sort of stuff. I think going through data structures would be useful to me. And I think that's kind of a couple of questions Sanjay is asking is what are the data structures? What's pointing to where? What data is in each way in these files? That kind of helps give us a little bit of logic.
Yeah, maybe some like process diagram type things that kind of show is that what you're talking about, those different stages?
Honestly, some raw files and just say, here's the actual JSON in
Okay.
there.
That's what we're looking for also, the exact files that get produced and how often you want each file to kind of like modify per signature and things like that, at least in the basic scenario.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay, great. Hopefully the demo will produce those raw files. So that should help. Okay, great.
Makes your job easier.
Yeah, I'll let you do one thing. Great. All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks.
Thanks, folks. Bye.